Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Sam Kwok here, one of the Kwok Brothers, and welcome back to your next stimulus check news. This is August 10th, 2020, and here is your stimulus news. Now, yesterday I released a video basically detailing and breaking down President Trump's executive orders on four major items, which were the payroll tax deferment, eviction moratorium, the unemployment check of $400 a week, as well as the extension for deferment of student loans and student loan interest. So if you guys want to see that breakdown, the video is down below. If you guys want to see yesterday's video, definitely want to watch it before I go through this. Now, in this video, I'm going to go and talk about, can the president actually do this? I think that's a question that everyone has in mind right now. I know a lot of people are saying, well, it's going to get challenged, it's not going to do much. So what I have in my hand is the actual text for the memorandum that President Trump wrote, as well as the executive order that President Trump signed. So I'm going to briefly give you guys the highlights, all the important things, and talk about, can the executive order actually do something about the four different items that we talked about. Now, I don't have the memorandum for the payroll tax deferment as well as the student loan deferment, which I'll update you guys on tomorrow. Another reason why you guys should definitely subscribe if you guys want to keep on getting these updates. So let's go ahead and talk about the memorandum as far as the unemployment benefit of $400 a week. That's a memorandum. So I apologize, I called it an executive order yesterday, but it appears that it is only a memorandum. Now, before I go and do this, I do want to mention that this is my own interpretation, my own opinion as far as what the memorandum and executive order says. Please don't misconstrue this as a legal representation of what the memorandum or the executive order actually is. So with the memorandum, what I want to cover and achieve throughout this video is, can the president really reappropriate the funds? That's the question at hand. How can the president create funding for $400 a week unemployment when the president doesn't have the checkbook for the United States government? Remember, only Congress can pass any provision related to financing or funding for programs or legislative bills or laws and things like that. So the president, again, does not have the power to control the Treasury. The Congress does. But reading the memorandum, there might be a way. There's a little loophole that President created, and I'll talk about that in just one sec. Now, the onset and the context as far as where President Trump is getting his funding is from FEMA, which is funding in a department that's often used for natural disasters like hurricane, earthquake. So when Hurricane Katrina hit many years ago, FEMA was there to help restore and recover the natural disaster. So on the memorandum it says, and I quote, "I am hereby directing Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, to assist in providing benefits from the DRF, and am calling upon the states to use their CRF, which is Coronavirus Relief Fund," and we'll talk about that in just one sec, "to bring continued financial relief to Americans who are suffering from unemployment due to the coronavirus COVID-19 outbreak." Now, following that, he also backs that up by saying Section 2, providing disaster relief funds. And I think this is the loophole that the President Trump is trying to use to get funding for the unemployment of $400 a week. So it says, I quote, "On March 13, 2020, I declared a national emergency recognizing the threat posed by COVID-19. I also determined that the same day that COVID-19 outbreak constituted an emergency of nationwide scope pursuant to Section 501B of the Stafford Act." Now, this is very interesting because President Trump did declare an emergency, and FEMA being often used for national emergencies and natural disaster, President Trump is trying to justify the use of FEMA funds of the unemployment of $400 a week, calling it a national emergency. It's a part of a continuing narrative that we're in an emergency state right now. So very, very interesting. And again, just as a reminder, there's $44 billion in disaster relief fund right now inside of FEMA, and President Trump wants to use $19 billion inside of the disaster relief fund to cover the unemployment benefit of $400 a week. Now, if the money dries up, all $19 billion dries up, that would halt and stop the unemployment benefit. If we reach December 6th, 2020, that stops the $400 a week unemployment benefit. So very interesting to see how President Trump might be able to kind of wiggle around this. Again, this is just a memorandum. This is not an executive order. And this is more so, hey, I'm urging FEMA director to do this. And remember that 75% of the unemployment fund will come from federal agency, and President Trump is asking the state to cover 25%. And of course, the question is, how are the states going to fork up the 25% portion of the $400 a week unemployment? Well, remember, the CRF, which is the Coronavirus Relief Fund, was created during the CARES Act passing. So when CARES Act passed, $150 billion was allocated to the Coronavirus Relief Fund. So basically, President Trump is saying, hey, states and state governors, go and use the CRF to cover the unemployment benefit of $100 a week, which is 25% of the $400 portion. And also, what's really interesting is that going over to Section 4 of the memorandum, it's called Assistance Program for Lost Wages. This is something that I really didn't catch on, and also most media outlets are not talking about this. Now, basically what this section covers is that if a state is experiencing a significant loss of wages, governor of that respective state can request from FEMA a grant to cover the lost wages or provide some sort of assistance for those lost wages. So again, something that the media doesn't really talk about, and it's here on the memorandum. So that is the memorandum in a nutshell. Pretty much the rest pretty much covers what different references that he's going through. And guys, I'm going to leave the memorandum as well as the executive order text down below so that you guys can read it on your own. Maybe you guys have a different twist or an interpretation as far as what this memorandum means. Again, this is my own interpretation, my own opinion, so please don't misconstrue this as actual legal representation of what the memorandum means. Now, one thing that the President Trump did miss out on the memorandum is the fact that you should go and smash the like button on this video, help us out with our YouTube algorithm, go and hit the thumbs up icon. That's going to help us out greatly. Now, moving along to the executive order side, which is directly aimed at the eviction moratorium, which I don't think is going to get challenged that much, but even in the executive order, there's some interesting language as to whether the executive order has power or does not have power. So let's go and first talk about what the executive order covers. Now, the first item that stood out to me was what the FHFA is doing right now and what they have announced. Now, FHFA is Federal Housing Finance Agency, and they sort of supervise and provide guidance to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Now, what they have announced is that FHFA has announced that enterprises, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, will extend the foreclosure suspension until at least August 31st, 2020. Now, previously with the CARES Act, it only gave 60 days from the date of passing the CARES Act, which is around May-ish when the 60-day expired. Well, apparently now it's till August 31st to when the foreclosure suspension is to take place. So that's one of the items that stood out to me as far as reading the executive order, and pretty much the rest of the executive order talks about how the eviction moratorium comes into play. Now, the question at play right now is not whether the eviction moratorium should or shouldn't happen. I think that's pretty much a given. But the question at hand right now is that will this executive order stand, and can this executive order be enforced? That's the question at hand right now, right? That's the item that's being challenged the most. Now, what's interesting is that if you go over to Section 4, where it talks about response to public health risks of eviction and foreclosure, it reads, and I quote, "The Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Director of CDC shall consider whether any measures temporarily halting residential evictions of any tenants for failure to pay rent are reasonably necessary to prevent the further spread of COVID-19 from one state or possession into any other state or possession." So, the key word here is shall consider. Now, if the language is shall, that means a direct order. Hey, if you don't do this, that's a violation of the executive order. But the language says shall consider. What this pretty much says is, hey, Director of CDC, I want you to go and think about and consider the fact whether halting the eviction could help stop the spread of COVID-19. I mean, I could consider whatever I want and not do it, right? So the language is shall consider. Again, gives kind of a way out, and the executive order kind of loses power with that kind of word. Now, another item that I want to highlight under Section 3, this is paragraph D, it says, in consultation with the Secretary of Treasury, the Director of FHFA shall review all existing authorities and resources that may be used, keyword may be used, prevent evictions and foreclosure for renters and homeowners resulting from hardship caused by COVID-19. Again, the language is may be used, which in legal term may just means that, hey, you can do it, but you don't have to do it, right? It doesn't always have to happen. If the language was shall, it means that has to happen without questions asked. But the language says may be used, which is a softer version, and pretty much the Secretary of Treasury and the Director of FHFA doesn't have to do it if they don't want to. But again, this is President Trump's executive order, wink, wink, right? You should do it. If you don't, then you're going to be on the bad side of President Trump's list. So when some of the lawmakers come out and say, well, President Trump's executive order really doesn't do anything, it has no power, it's going to get challenged, there's some points made there because how the language inside of the executive order is worded. And all in all, this is an executive order. Now, tomorrow, I'll come back to update you guys as far as what's happening with the payroll tax deferment as well as the student loan deferment. What are the executive orders and what does the tax say about that? So definitely come back, subscribe to our channel if you guys want the latest update, as well as hit the bell notification icon if you guys don't want to miss out on the updates that we're going to release. So I'll see you guys tomorrow, and stay healthy and be safe.